You have any words, coach, for the team?
Rah, rah, ree. Kick him in the knee. Rah, rah, rass. Kick him in the other knee.
Wow, he has never coached a team in his life.
Go out there and bite him in the kneecaps.
We just got to go out there and play our game, and stick to the fundamentals and just do what we do best. Just focus.
If we score more touchdowns than the other team, we will win, kids. We will win. Let's talk about how we're misusing credit in America.
First of all, people think credit is money. Start there. It's not. The most dangerous thing in my wallet today, Joe, is my American Express Black Card. Because this thing here, and it's sexy, and it looks nice, and it's pretty, there's no limit on it. But that's not even a credit card. This is a charge card, which means in 30 days, I got to pay the whole balance. A lot of people get in trouble. You start seeing celebrities in their bankruptcies and people who won the lottery, whatever. You see this credit card stuff because they thought this was an extension of their wallet. It's not meant to be an extension on your annual compensation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another live recording of the Stacky Benjamin Show. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, and I will introduce all of these characters in just a moment. Where's Deb's the most important person? I can't find her. There she is.
No offense taken.
I thought I was the most important person.
Thank you. We always save the best for last, Deb. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm missing one. We'll introduce everybody here in a minute. We love to record live, so this will be our show for next Friday. So you're getting a preview. We'll be adding in all of the sound effects later, so you hear all that later. Feel free to say hi to everybody. Tell us where you're from. If you're in Florida, turn this off and just get the hell out right now. And I hope everybody's doing all right. I hope that everybody's safe. Although we do this as if it's live, you're going to see it with all the warts. It's going to be super fun. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our recording. Doug, you about ready to start this thing up?
8 or 10 more minutes. I'll be ready.
All right. Yes.
Okay, fine.
We're starting slightly late. Doug just pointing out the obvious. All right, here we go.
That's actually not what I was doing.
Oh, I thought you were. Yeah, just give it our 10 minutes, Joe. Let's
were just
restart that
collateral
intro one more
damage
time,
in my
pal.
joke.
All right, here we go.
3, 2, 1. Live from the basement of the YouTube headquarters, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and is the key to a happy retirement, eating dinner at 4:30, and a great tax strategy? Duh. Today, we nerd out on taxes with the guy who's chief money nerd at our brother podcast, Earn and Invest, Doc G. And joining him from the Beyond Budgets podcast, does tax savings go in the budget? We'll ask her, CFP Deb Meyer. And also the guy behind the Fi Tax Guy YouTube channel, CFP Sean Mullaney. But of course, today we won't just tax you with tax talk. At the halfway mark of today's show, we'll see how our contributors do answering my incredible trivia question. And now, a guy who says he couldn't have ruined his wife's birthday celebration because he didn't even know it was her birthday. It's Joe Saul-Sehy.
That's right, Doug. How can you ruin it if you had no idea? Hey, everybody.
Never there.
Welcome to We Have No Clue How This Whole Thing Works podcast. I am Joe Saul-Sehy, and happy Friday to all of you. We are ready to have a robust conversation. What do you do to celebrate Friday? You talk tax planning. That's what we do, Doug. We know how to light this weekend candle. It's like happy hour for money nerds.
Down, party people.
Yes, it's going to be great. Let's meet this band of characters, which we have a well, we're going to flex the fact that we know some people that know what they're talking about when it comes to financial planning and taxes. Let's start off with the gentleman behind our brother podcast, Earn and Invest. Doc G's here. How are you, man?
I'm good. It's like, let's start with the one who doesn't know about tax planning. I was like, Doug was like, it's Sean Mullaney, CFP, and Deb Meyer, CFP, and
that other guy,
Doc G from Earn and Invest. No letters behind his name.
We got to have one person, though, who's the everyman. You filed taxes before.
I have, and I have a mother who is a CPA who's always made my life so easy. So I am the case study here of someone who doesn't understand things.
Well, we're going to find out if Doc G maybe needs to know more to get where he's going.
I understand a little.
Yes. And let's talk next to the woman from the Behind Budgets podcast. I was just thinking, I'm listening to her latest show and I realized I don't think she's been on since like 2017. Deb Meyer's back. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Joe.
It's so funny because I remember you and I sitting at a restaurant in Orlando, planning your first visit. And that feels like it was like 4 days ago. Deb, where'd the time go?
I don't know. And of course, at that time, I think I was living in Missouri. Then I moved to Florida. Now I'm back in Missouri. So all this craziness.
You had to get out before the hurricanes. That was.
Wow. Yeah. It's a scary situation for those down there. I know this is going live next week, but yeah.
Yeah, we're recording this before the second hurricane, so we're thinking about all of our friends in Florida right now. But Deb, for the 4 people that don't know about the Beyond Budgets podcast out there's got to be one. Tell everybody what you do.
Yeah. So I started Beyond Budgets in November of last year, and it's really just to help parents get a solid foundation that's beyond just basic budgeting. So as the name implies, we go into concepts around tax planning, saving for college. It's really just designed for parents that are raising kids. They're in that life stage where they need a little bit of extra education. And yeah, I want to help give it to them.
The last episode I was just listening to, you were talking about better diversification as an example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I talk about investing strategies. We have a mix of individual episodes that I'm just talking on some kind of financial planning topic or investing topic. And then we also have some interviews with really cool guests.
Well, are you ready to get your tax nerd hat on, Deb?
I am. I'm stoked.
Well, let's talk to our friend who we think of as a tax nerd. He's also a CFP. Sean Mullaney is here. How are you, brother?
Joe, it's great to be here. It's funny. Today's sort of, we got the hurricane in Florida. I'm a Mets fan and a Jets fan. We just fired our head coach. We got a big playoff game in Flushing. And, there's all these letters out there in the world, CFP, CPA. Jordan, you're an MD, right? And sometimes people get that confused about me. I'm actually a CPA.
I'm not CPA, not CFP.
I'm a CPA, not a CFP. But, it's so confusing. I am a financial planner. I work in that realm. But you know what? It's all about sort of developing your own thoughts, right? It's great that so-and-so has such and such credentials behind their name, but it's all about what we're going to talk about today. It's developing your own opinion, depending on, different people can look at different issues in a reasonable manner and come to different conclusions. I'm looking forward to this one because this one's got all sorts of balls in the air on it.
It totally does. What's funny, Sean, is that Doug always tells me that I forget to put his letters behind his name, which is BMOC. He's got BMOC. Remember those letters? Anybody?
I remember that. Yeah. I could tell you what that is. If that's going to be the trivia question, then I'm in really good shape.
It might be a little more difficult than that. Doug, we got to start putting the letters behind your name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got all kinds
Or
of
maybe it should
letters.
be BMOP.
But what's the
Man
P
on
for?
podcast.
The Pig Man of Podcast.
Big man
Wow.
podcast. Woo-hoo.
Wow, I'm the slow guy in this show. I didn't even see that coming when it hit me like a truck. Sean, we asked Deb about the Better Budgets podcast, Beyond Budgets podcast. How about the Tax Guy YouTube channel? What you got going on there?
Yeah, so I got my YouTube channel. I'm putting up videos every Saturday morning, and that's going to be largely tax focused, but not exclusively. I've got some ideas for some different personal finance topics. And then my Tax Guy blog, FiTaxGuy.com. It's the intersection of tax and financial independence. So it focuses a lot on retirement accounts, a lot about how tax planning and financial independence planning intersect.
You know what's great, Jordan, is that we've got experts Deb and Sean with us. You know what's nearly as good as that?
Tell me, Joe. Tell me.
The fact that this episode's brought to you by State Farm. How about that? Isn't that wonderful? If you own a small business, whatever your business might be, you need someone who understands, and that's where State Farm Small Business Insurance comes in. State Farm agents, they're small business owners too, and they know what it takes. They can help you choose personalized policies that fit your budget. Small business insurance from State Farm. Everybody sing it. Like a good neighbor. Come on. State Farm is there. See, we're great. Talk to your local agent today. And State Farm just locked us out like your head coach got locked out of the Jets facility today, Sean. We've got Deb Meyer here, Sean Mullaney, Doc G, neighbor Doug, the BMOP on this podcast. Before we get today's action going, though, we do have a couple other sponsors that make sure this is free for everybody. Let's hear from them, and we'll get this party started. All right. Steve, just go right into the music at the end of that, at the end of the ads. All right. 3, 2, 1. The inspiration for today's discussion comes to us from the Oblivious Investor blog. Mike Piper, longtime guy in the FIRE community, in the personal finance community, is the author of that blog, and he likes to nerd out on taxes. And we're going to join him today because his piece is called Effective versus Marginal Tax Rate in Retirement. That's what got me excited, Doc. When I read that, I was like, oh, this is going to be a great day. Mike's writing about effective versus marginal tax rates, #dream. And then he writes, his subtitle is Why Taxes Don't Usually Cause People to Go Broke. And that got me thinking. I'm like, wait a minute, tax strategies, those are super important when it comes to your financial plan. So Deb, I want to start with you. When you're sitting down with somebody and you're looking at their financial plan, you're helping them build their financial plan for themselves, where does tax planning really fit in?
I think it's a really important piece. Like Sean, I actually have a background as a CPA as well, so I have the tax geek element going here. But I think for a lot of people, it's crucial to understand what your current tax bracket is, but it's also really important to try to kind of project out what that's going to look like down the road. So any client conversation I'm having, especially when we're trying to make decisions around Roth contributions or conversions, taxes are a huge piece of that. And it really does make a difference in the not only the current financial plan, but that future financial plan as well.
Sean, where do you think it fits?
It's sort of everywhere because, you think about the 3 topics that folks get all worked up about: investments, retirement, and taxes, right? Those are the 3 financial planning topics that everybody's all excited about. Well, taxes is embedded in all 3, even though one of them is taxes itself. So I'll just give you one example. There aren't going to be many in the audience. Now, there might be some self-employed folks, some artists, NFL quarterbacks, but most of the folks in the audience are probably going to need to capture the employer match in their 401k, at least that, in order to get to a place where retirement is a realistic possibility. Well, that's tax planning, it's retirement planning, and it's investment planning all wrapped up in one. It's sort of odd how the financial planning industry sort of evolved around, beta and investments. And it's like, okay, that's great, but taxes isn't everything. And I think there's so much great play in the joints for those of us in the audience who are still working and thinking about, well, wait a minute, how can I afford my retirement? And tax planning is going to be, I think, one of the top things in that inquiry.
All right, Doc, balance out the tax nerds here, because I heard a lot of tax nerdery there between Deb and Sean. Mike says people don't usually go broke because they don't understand taxes. Do you feel like tax planning's been a big part of you getting where you want to go?
So I think it has, but I also think we overestimate the stakes. And so people who don't understand taxes feel exactly like that. I'm going to do something wrong and I'm going to be torpedoed. And if I put it in the Roth, God forbid, instead of the 401k, or I put it in the 401k and God forbid, instead of the Roth, it's going to cause all sorts of problems. And what I think I've found is that we historically tend, at least at this point in time, to pay lower taxes than we could. And that if you figure out how to be good as opposed to be the best and get the right help, I don't think taxes are going to hinder you. Yes, they're going to be something you deal with all the time. And because they are a reality and we have to pay them, we're always going to be trying to optimize. But with the right help and being really thoughtful about it, it shouldn't really stop you.
Deb, Mike says that he doesn't see people go broke because they don't understand taxes. Do you see? Oh, look at you. You're like,
I disagree respectfully. No, I think it's, especially for like small business owners or self-employed people, taxes are such a critical piece to plan for during those working years. Now, in the article, it focused more on retirees. And I think there's, but even in that, like, there are some really smart tax strategies that you can employ. And if you don't have the knowledge or you're not working with an advisor to understand the repercussions, it can be really detrimental to having that big nest egg that you're depending on in the, later years in life.
It's funny though, Deb, so many people don't know. I've been a financial planner for a long time, but when I was a financial planner, so many people don't know what Mike talks about right here in the header. They don't understand the difference between effective and marginal tax rates. I can't tell you, and maybe, I don't know if this still happens or not, Deb, tell me if it does. But I just remember back in the day, people, like a married couple, would come in and meet with me and they go, well, only one of us works, because we did the math. And if the second person works, we'll have less money because it's going to throw us in the next tax bracket. And I go, good news. That's not how tax brackets work. You get to go to work, which, by the way, it turns out they didn't want to do in the first place. Right? It turns out that it was all a big smokescreen. But how often have you heard that people think that more money's going toward taxes than it really is?
Yeah, I've heard it. I have a personal example, but I don't want to name names, but my sister, she's like, well, my husband, he does well as a doctor, and I don't know that it's going to make that much of a difference because and I'm like, you can still earn money. Yes, you're going to pay taxes, but you're still earning money.
And you haven't gotten a holiday gift from her since, have you?
She had young kids and the cost of daycare and all of that. You have to justify, okay, but purely on a tax perspective, there's no 100% tax rate, right? So
did you hear Doug? Deb,
No,
did you hear Doug? No,
I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, I guarantee you have not gotten a holiday card from her since you forced her back to work.
I didn't force her.
well, and Doug, if she did get holiday gifts from her before, now that she knows she got thrown under the bus on the Stacky Benjamin show, now
you're so out.
Deb, Christmas is over. It's gone.
I'm sorry.
It's done. Yes. And she's married to
she's now very entrepreneurial. So she is getting back in there. And for her, it makes sense because her girls are older now. So.
Well, and Sean, I know you enough to know, let's keep on that entrepreneur theme that Deb just managed. If somebody's an entrepreneur, I think you would agree taxes can make a big difference for those people very much.
Well, and I think we have to step back and say life cycle matters so much here. I have a little saying that the tax code wants you to be early retired and married, right? And Deb made a great point. So think about a self-employed person, right? They're paying income tax and they might, hey, do I do a traditional 401k, a Roth 401k? Well, they have to make a decision at a marginal tax bracket. But not only are they paying income tax, they're also paying payroll tax and they're paying both halves, right? You go to work, you have a W-2 job, 6.2% goes out from your salary for Social Security, another 1.45% goes out for Medicare. When you're self-employed, you got both of those halves to deal with, right? Well, think about, so that's your working years, your entrepreneurial years. Get to early retirement, and assuming you're not taking Social Security, FICA just went from an outflow to a no flow, okay? And then whatever age you determined to turn on Social Security, you've gone from outflow to no flow to inflow, right? So I think a lot of this, you have to step back, and what Mike's doing in the article, I think very well, is saying, well, at 65, what does this look like, right? Because a lot of the people in the audience are trying to be retired by 65. So that's a great place to stop and say, well, what does this look like? And I think it shows that when we're retirees, the tax code tends to favor us. Mike doesn't make the point about the FICA taxes, but he does make the point about the progressive tax rates, right? Where you're taking that money that you deferred all those years back into income, you're going up the progressive tax brackets and the high standard deduction. When we're at work and we're trying to make a decision, it's basically a marginal tax rate issue because we just have the income. Right? The income's the income. We get a bonus on New Year's Eve. We get a bonus. We're taxed. There's nothing we can do about that, but we can make some marginal decisions on, say, a traditional 401k versus a Roth 401k. That's why when we're working, the marginal rate matters so much more. And as Mike is pointing out in the article, the effective rate matters so much more for lived experience when we're 65 and retired.
Well, is that an issue for you, Doc, that, you know, during working years, to Sean's point, you're looking at taxes one way, then, you know, quoting Stephen Covey, you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other end with it, right? The other end looks, according to Sean, a lot different because now you're worried about what your effective tax rate is. Are you worried about that?
I was very worried about it until I started using tax calculators. So just like your average person who's ignorant of this stuff, I had my accountant who was my mother and she was doing everything for me. So I didn't pay a huge amount of attention to it. And then I started looking at my personal situation. For instance, I am very much in the tax deferred space. And so I started thinking, oh my gosh, you know, at some point I'm going to be paying this huge amount of taxes. But when
is that like a huge tax bomb down the road for you?
It is on some level, but when you do go and you start looking at the tax calculators, et cetera, you know, most of us, again, because we don't know the difference between marginal and effective tax rate, just pick the highest tax rate and assume we're going to be paying forever at the highest tax rate. And the truth of the matter is the effective tax rate actually is a lot less than that, even for people who do have a tax bomb. And so I think we sometimes lose track and we try to be as efficient as possible. And a lot of times we don't realize you're going to be paying the taxes. You might be paying them early. You might be paying them later. Things might happen in the tax code that can change. And so there's a lot of pieces that we actually have very little control over. So we can do our best guesstimated tax plan right now and hope that we're right? So we can do that. But the truth of the matter is, I think if we kind of do some really good moves and get the right professionals involved, again, the likelihood it's going to blow up in our face, especially at that retirement period. So I'm not talking about the small business period and when we're actively building, but I'm talking about when you get to retirement, which is what I think a lot of people worry about. The likelihood it's going to really blow up in your face is small.
This is maybe a different show, Doc, but the fact that your mom is your tax professional, do you think that in some ways that might hurt you because it's a family member, you just assume that she's taking care of you, and so you end up knowing less about it because you think she's got it handled?
Oh, for sure. And, you know, so I grew up as a physician, so I thought I could offload all my financial decisions to a financial advisor. And of course, then as I learned about finances and started a podcast and really did the deep dive, I realized that I had offloaded all this important stuff to someone else that I should have known about myself. And I think I did a lot of that with the taxes too. I think, you know, my biggest problem is my mom's exceedingly conservative as an accountant. So I probably pay more taxes than anyone.
Hold on a second. Were you Doogie Howser? You just told us you grew up as a physician.
Yes. Yes.
Were you in med school when you were like 11?
It was about 13. No.
It's a physician out of the womb.
Let me amend that. I grew up thinking that I was going to be a physician and didn't really worry about money or investments or those kind of things. I really had my head down and was worried about, you know, taking care of people and learning the art of being a doctor. So I kind of offloaded as much of that stuff as I could. And just like anything else, you know, it's important to really educate yourself. Even if you're using a financial advisor, you're using a good CPA, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't also understand, because ultimately you have to help drive that ship. And a lot of times, even now, I'm realizing, boy, I could have known better questions to ask my CPA. And I think that's really important as you're doing that planning, so you don't get afraid for the future.
Let's go there before the break. Deb, I love what Doc G's saying about you hire this professional help, not just to delegate some of the tough stuff, but to make you smarter, right? So that you're better at this. What are some of the basics that the pros around you should be teaching you about taxes that you don't see enough people know?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, they assume they can just delegate and give that responsibility over to the advisor, but it's really about empowering you to understand. Like when I'm working with a small business client on their financials, it's not just about me understanding their financials, it's about them understanding their financials.
Right.
So just getting in the shoes of, okay, yes, I'm hiring this professional to better understand, but it's still on me. I'm still stewarding that business. I'm still owning that. And I need to be informed about what that looks like. So I was just having a conversation earlier with one of my clients, and he just started another business. So they had a primary business. Now they have a secondary business. And he's like, okay, do I have to make 2 different estimated tax payments? And I said, no, luckily it's just one estimated tax payment as your individual. And luckily we'll figure that all into your tax projection, things like that. But
save the price of one stamp.
Right. Luckily he doesn't have to do 2 different federal payments. But yeah, I mean, it's just, again, using that education to understand your situation. And, some things can happen to advisors on a moment's notice, and you don't want to be left in a lurch if you don't understand the underlying details, especially when it comes to taxes.
Yeah, I remember when I was an advisor, I would tell my clients that you hire me not to do it all for you, because if I get hit by the bus and you're in the same spot you were in before me, I haven't really done my job. My job's to make you smarter. Do you think, Deb, one of the basics things people should know, because I'm trying to think about what are these basic things that we all should know? Maybe Roth versus pre-tax when it comes to our retirement plan. Sean mentioned retirement plans earlier. Deb, you think that's a basic one we should know?
Yeah, I think understanding the difference between the two. So Roth IRA or 401k, that's already after tax money, and it can grow. You don't have to take it out at a certain point. With an IRA or a pre-tax 401k, once you turn that required distribution age, which is like 72 and up here on out, depending on what birth year you are, right. That's all going to be impacted, where you might have a bigger tax problem if you have the vehicles in a IRA or a pre-tax 401k, because you really do have to pay attention to your taxes as you're withdrawing in those retirement years and the required distributions kick in.
And then I guess, Sean, speaking of that, let's pick up where Deb left off. She was talking about this requirement distribution. It seems to me that that's a basic thing everybody should know as well.
Yeah, I got a couple for you. So one is that, yes, there is a end of the line, right? So you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, you're putting money into that traditional 401k, essentially tax deferring it. You're saying, look, this is $23,000 going into the 401k. Don't tax me now. That's the equivalent of getting a tax deduction. That's great. But the IRS says, all right, or the Congress says, the party won't last forever. So in your 70s, eventually you have to start taking money out. It's based on an actuarial table. It actually starts relatively modestly. The first RMDs, depending on your age, are in the high 3s or low 4 in terms of a percentage. The other thing I think people should understand is basis recovery. So I think some people out there are worried about early retirement. They're like, oh, I've built up these taxable brokerage accounts, which actually aren't that bad, right? It's not in a 401k or an IRA, so it doesn't have some of the tax advantages, but it turns out they're not that bad. And one of the reasons is something called basis recovery. And what the heck is that? Well, Joe, say you bought Microsoft today, and I'm not giving investment advice to anyone, and I'm not telling you, I don't even know what Microsoft's stock price is, but say you buy it today for 100, and then tomorrow you sell it for 100. Okay. The people, hopefully, in the 5 in the squares here know that you have no tax on that. Well, why is that? It's called basis, right? You have this recovery of what you invested in it. Well, early retirees get to early retirement and they have years of mutual funds. And so maybe they have 500,000 sitting in a brokerage account, and they say, well, I'm going to spend 100,000 in my first year of retirement. Well, now I'm going to be taxed on 100,000, right? No. right? You have basis in those mutual funds, and depends on the mutual fund, how it did. Maybe for 100,000 you sell, you have 40,000 of basis, you recover 50,000, 60,000 of basis. So you have to understand, okay, wait a minute. If I sell 100,000 of this to live, how much of that is actually going to be taxable income? And I think some people get to early retirement or thinking about early retirement and are forgetting to consider that tax basis thing.
Yeah, and I think what's also important to know, and I think we do a lousy job of teaching this, a lot of times when you make, for instance, the Roth versus traditional decision, or even what to put in a taxable brokerage, you're really making that conclusion based on a bunch of estimates that you have no idea if they're going to come true or not. And so the truth of the matter is what we should really be teaching is diversification. And that's the thing that no one taught me at the beginning. What we want is tax status diversification, because we have no idea what tax bracket we're going to be in when we're retired. We have no idea what the laws are going to be when we're retired. I mean, there are a lot of things that are going to happen that we have no control over. And I think we as professionals do a really bad job at teaching people that diversification so that you don't get hit too high or too low at all. You don't either pay too much taxes now or pay too much taxes later. You kind of even out the road.
I think we feed into that too often. Deb, listening to one of your latest episodes of the Beyond Budgets podcast, you were talking about this. Too often you see the financial media looks into the crystal ball, and we don't know where taxes are going to be in the future. And a lot of times people are using these calculators projecting where they're going to be. And frankly, I don't think we have any clue.
No, it's hard. I mean, you can take guesses based on what current tax law is, but it's hard to go 20, 30, 40 years out, right? It's hard to even go 5 years out. Like, we know the Tax Cuts and Job Act, it's going to start expiring next year, but depending on who comes into office and what Congress decides to do, and that will really impact whether the Tax Cut and Job Act provisions are extended or if they're just completely cut off. And we start back like we were pre-tax cuts.
And then the administration after that, and the administration after that, and the administration after that. Yeah, Sean?
Joe, one thing I do look at is congressional motivation and congressional history in this regard, right?
Did you say congressional and motivation in the same sentence? I'm sorry. I just thought I heard that.
Think about this, right? And I don't even know what the federal debt is. If that's a trivia question, I'm in trouble. But it's something like $35 trillion of debt, right? That's a bad thing. Right. That is not a good thing, at least in my opinion, not to get too political. But then people say, well, wait a minute. So retirees are going to have all these additional taxes because of this huge federal debt. And I don't think that conclusion follows from the premise. I think there's plenty of other deep pockets that Congress could go after for that $35 trillion of federal debt. Don't quote me on the exact number. But then you say, well, wait a minute, what has Congress done in the recent past? And if you look at the TCJA in 2017, you look at secure, the delaying of RMDs twice, the CARES Act canceled RMDs for a year. What you see from 2017 to 2022 is these constant small tax cuts for retirees, even though a lot of commentators are out there saying, wait a minute, they're going to be all these tax increases. So I tend to be more optimistic about the future. Now, I fully say that is not a risk-free proposition. And so going back to something Jordan was saying about diversification, one wrinkle of that, I like to call it optimizing for known trade-offs, right? So like, for example, people worry about a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. Which one should I do? I think for many, I tend to like the Roth IRA over the Roth 401k. The big reason there is if you do a Roth 401k, that's $1 you can't deduct into a traditional 401k. For many in the audience, the way the rules work, it's arcane. Many can do a Roth IRA at home, but can't deduct a traditional IRA contribution. So why not do the Roth IRA at home and take a deduction for the traditional 401k at work? There you're optimizing for a known trade-off. So yeah, there's a lot of speculation here. I'm not as worried as some of the other commentators are in terms of retirees. Retirees have a vote and they show up on election day. But we'll see, right? You got to do your own analysis on that.
I don't think it's a political statement to say the U.S. has too much debt. I think it's probably universal. I mean, there might be somebody out there going, no, I think we deserve more debt. We need more.
I don't like that you put a bad connotation on it, Joe. I'm a big fan of debt, and I don't like the negative, like syrup you're pouring over the top of it.
Yeah, right. Speaking of negative connotations, I'm going to put a negative connotation on the fact that we are late for the biggest part of every Friday episode, which is our trivia challenge between our 3 frequent contributors, none of which are here today. Mom, who's not usually here. Jesse Kramer's played for her a lot lately. Sean Mullaney, you'll play on behalf of Mom. Doc G, you are horrible at this, so we will have you play on behalf of OG, because that makes sense, Doug, right? We got to keep this competition close.
Logic.
And Deb, just to keep genders the same, will have you play on behalf of Paula Pant from Afford Anything, which means, hey, Deb, playing on behalf of Paula brings up some good news and some bad news. You want the good news or the bad news?
I'll take the good news.
Well, the good news is you get to guess last, which is a position of power. Now, the bad news is that's because you're in last place. But Paula's had this advantage forever, and Doug doesn't seem to be able to make anything of it. But Paula/Deb have 8 points. Mom/Sean has 11. OG/Doc G has 15. So can Deb help Team Paula get closer to Mom for second? Can Sean help Mom maybe make this a race for the win? Well, we need a trivia question to find out. Doug, what are we talking about this fine Friday?
Well, hey there, stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and you can't talk taxes without thinking about the guy with the ultimate tax strategy, Al Capone. Capone, yeah, you heard me right. Capone paid 0 in taxes.
That's perfect.
Because the guy was a genius. He paid 0 in taxes because he just plain didn't file. Who'd have thunk it? That worked well until he was finally arrested in 1929 on 22 counts of tax evasion.
You wouldn't have seen that going sideways, Doug. How does not filing go sideways?
Sometimes life just comes up and smacks you.
Strange.
On today's date, back in 1931, he finally went to prison. The government, they had to string together all of Capone's illegal operations to assert how much he owed. They looked at all his businesses, and bootlegging and drugs and prostitution, gambling. And hey, little known facts and bonus trivia for you, burner cell phones. Dude cornered the market on those. So here's today's question. When the government finished estimating the income from all of those businesses, they decided he made how much money back in 1931 from all of those in total. Don't forget about the cell phones. I'll be back right after I finish this hand of spades with Joe's mom, Gertrude, and her friend Ruth. I got $5 on this hand, and if I win, I'm afraid I'm going to have to file tax return this year. I don't want to go to jail.
You definitely want to make sure you file if you win that $5, Doug. But who's going to get this? I don't know. $5. No money, but all the glory. Doc, you get to go first. Al Capone, how much money did the government say Al Capone never paid tax on back in 1931?
I was going to say I'm happy to double down here, and you guys would think that's because I'm being optimistic. And no, I just want to cost OG as many points as possible. like if I win, you give me 1, but if I lose, you take away 2.
We were joking about throwing him under the bus, and you said the silent part out loud.
I know. I have no idea. I'm going to guess. So this is in today's dollars or
no? This is in 1931 dollars.
In 1931 dollars, I'm going to say $1,100,001.
$1,100,001.
I like my ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Sean, what do you want to do with that? $1 million? Do you think that's high? You think that's low?
So I think that's low because the first thing that sort of came to my head is Al Capone, right? So he's sort of on the top of the funnel, right? Or the pyramid of the mob. And I know it's inflated dollars, but I feel like it's got to be an 8-figure number, probably a low 8-figure number. But This is just sort of my.
You think he's way low?
Yeah, so I'd say Jordan's a little low. I will say $11 million.
$11 million. So we got 1.1, and then we got a factor of 10. Deb, 11.
Oh my goodness!
I was go factor of 10 again and go 110. So.
I was like, okay, what was a big salary back in the 1920s and 30s? And it was probably like $5,000 a year, right? Like
right.
10,000. So I was going to go like 667,328.
And you're still going to do that.
You know I have to do the math on all this stuff, right? What the hell?
We all had a
I
conversation.
thought an
about this,
exact
Doug,
number
before the
would be
show.
helping me win or helping Paula win. I don't know.
663,000.
667,000.
328. I wrote
Correct.
it down.
328. You know, to round, right? She would have said 2795, but decided to round it to 328. All right, we got 67,328. 11 million for Sean, and Doc's got 1.1 million and $1. Who's going to be right? We'll find out in just a second. We'll be right back. What's
Good
up,
job.
Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to, since we're in a little break here, at the end when we do the credits, Sean and Deb, I'm coming to you.
All right.
Okay.
Start thinkerating.
All right. Well, I don't know if we're live or not because it is saying that this video was deleted by the user. Are we live? Has anybody
Uh-oh.
Checked?
It says live event,
It
live
says
recording.
live recording online.
Well,
say we
but Joe's
play it
not
like
talking
we're
about
live.
Riverside. He's talking about over on YouTube. Has anybody brought up the YouTube?
There it
page?
is. We are live.
So let's be
We
live.
are live. Hey guys, Rocky is here. Hey, Rocky Mark. Glad you're here with us. And Aaron is here. Aaron asks, if you have a small business, is it better to have an S Corp versus a sole proprietor? I've heard S Corp allows you to pay yourself as an employee. Does that really help? You know what, Aaron? We will do that on the show. We'll do that during the second half to promote that
Just don't ask me.
we're doing this live. Let me just make sure I write this.
Doc's answer to that is going to be, I don't know. I had people do that for me when I was 17.
My mom does it for
I pay
me.
someone to do that. I did an S Corp.
All right.
That's what I did.
Glad you guys are with us. And let's get to the second half. All right, Doug, you ready?
One sec. Yep. 3, 2, 1. Oh,
No, hold on
I
a
know.
second.
Yeah.
I started, but I keep hearing somebody pop. Sean, is that you? Yes.
All right, I mean, I'm popping.
Because
Ju-
you're going from mute
just when
to
you
not
turn the
mute.
microphone on.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
feels
okay.
it's
All right,
almost
I
like
won't
there's a
tur-
fan in the background. And
Right now, the AC's on. I can turn the AC
Yep.
off.
No, well, go ahead and just turn it. Just go ahead and I think Steve will be able to take out the pop. I don't hear it a lot. I just
Okay.
want to let you know
It's just in the
Sorry about that.
transition.
that we got
I
it.
think
All
if you
right,
leave it on, you're fine.
here we go. 3, 2, 1. Well, our voting is usually all over the place, but when it comes to Al Capone and his money, you guys are definitely all over the place. Doc, you're at 1.1 million and $1, which is
I'm feeling good. You know why? Because
Why?
I will not be in last place.
it's-
Someone's going to be worse than me.
you're right in the middle. Sean,
Someone's going to be worse than me.
Deb, and Doc think apparently your number is off by over a factor of 10. What are you thinking?
I don't know. I would not bet money on this proposition because you got inflation and it's like how much of the activities do they get like him on versus other? I don't know.
Spoken like a CPA.
Which is, Deb, I think exactly what you're thinking. Lots of inflation. So 667,000 back in 31 is a lot of money.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. We need a winner. Doug, who's it going to be?
well, hey there, stackers. I'm notable card shark and the guy who's the most honest guy ever on his taxes. Nobody honester than me for all the IRS agents listening. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. While it's fun playing cards with Joe's mom, I swear I can't win with that woman. Make sure she's on your team because she and Ruth just schooled me and Gertrude. Joe's mom says I shouldn't be so angry about it. She says I've got some kind of preoccupation with vengeance. Yeah, well, we'll see about that, old lady, won't we? We will see about that. Well, for today's question, which I would have totally won had I been a contestant and not at all because I've already seen the answer. On today's date in 1931, noted gangster Al Capone went to prison for 22 counts of tax evasion. The government asserted he made how much money which had never been taxed? Well, let's replay it for you. I will tell you that Doc G was off by just $83,899,999. Deb/Paula, well, she was off by $84,332.
It's 84 million. 84
84 million, 332,672, making Sean/Mom off by just 74 million, because the real answer is $85 million Capone raked in from burner cell phones.
Yeah, burner cell
Congratulations,
phones.
Sean.
A big part of 1931 of the game. He had the technical advantage, Doug. Had the tech advantage.
Yeah.
You know what's funny, Deb? I want to go back to your answer because 80 what'd you say, Doug? $85 million in 1931, Deb.
1931 is a lot of money. Whew.
That's insane.
I know you were playing the time value money game, and it still
I
was 85
completely
million.
off.
That guy made a ton of money. That was amazing.
I wonder if he had, I don't technically know his activities and how many people he had working under him, but I've got to imagine like an enormous fleet.
He must have.
Well, money.
I think what I heard happen was he went around the neighborhoods of Chicago and he said, if I get one person and you get two people, and then that person gets three people, like everybody will make a bunch of money and you don't have to work. Isn't that the way it worked, Doug?
So, totally. And that one little wormy guy that was his accountant, we all saw Untouchables, right? The guy with the glasses, he was the accountant. He was accounting for the equivalent of $1.7 billion in today's money.
$1.7 billion. Nice job, Mr. Mullaney, bringing Mom up closer to OG.
It's an honor to have won. So big feather in the cap today.
Wow.
And Doc, thanks for throwing the game. We appreciate it. Nice work.
I anchored everybody. I anchored them low. I did it for you, Joe. I did it for you.
So low. Holy cow. Let's go to the second half of this discussion. And I want to start off by talking about the Uber nerds out there and the things that we maybe worry too much about, because financial podcasts, of course, are people that love this topic. And let's maybe calm people down a little bit. Sean, let's start with you this time. Taxes on investments. It seems like when I see Uber nerds, they're so obsessed with sheltering. And yet I think Doc G nailed it. We should really be concerned about flexibility. I mean, I see so many nerds that end up with, oh boy, all my money's optimized and now I can't get any of it. Do you think tax on investments is maybe something our biggest money fans pay too much attention to?
Well, and Mike Piper in this article that you shared with us, Joe, makes this great point about the tax torpedo. So this is one of those money nerd things where, oh no, I make more income, maybe on investments, maybe because of tax deferred retirement accounts, whatever it is. And so that income makes more of my Social Security subject to tax. And they call that the tax torpedo. And it's got this big, scary name, the tax torpedo. But it turns out it doesn't have much to do with anybody's lived experience. They still tend to have a very low effective tax rate in retirement. And I think sometimes it gets to the worst outcome of all the outcomes in personal finance, which is not having something to worry about, right? If we don't have something to worry about, then we're in big trouble, right? So some people just need something to worry about. So if somebody can go grab the tax torpedo off the shelf, oh, thank goodness, right? We got something to worry about again. Or somebody can go grab Irma off the shelf. Oh, thank goodness, we got something to worry about. So, one of the things I tell people is, if in doubt, just save, right? Investments tend to be relatively lightly taxed in the United States from an income tax perspective. If you're in doubt, start saving and then figure it out later in terms of, oh, does it go in a 401k or a Roth IRA or a brokerage? I'm big on just, they talk about the biggest determinant of success is contribution rate, right? And I think that's true both from an investment perspective and a tax perspective.
It's so huge. I totally agree. A lot of people with not much money worried about taxes when they should be worried about contributing more money, especially, Deb, when they start out. And the thing that really frustrates me, I hear these commercials all the time from robo-advisors. And robo-advisors target in my opinion, the wrong people. They target these very young people who need a robo-advisor, much like camels need snow tires. Why you need a robo-advisor when you're 23 years old is beyond me. Yes, Doug, I said it out loud.
That's a thing that came out of your brain. You realize that, right?
Well, the point is they don't need it. And I just think a robo is ridiculous for a 24-year-old investor. But the thing, Deb, that they talk about, which is even more ridiculous, tax loss harvesting.
Yeah.
I've got a 24-year-old who's managed to save $500. They put it into a robo, and they do it because they offer tax loss harvesting.
Right.
Do we worry too much about tax loss harvesting in investing?
Yes, especially in the scenario you're painting with younger investors. And even just when you think about the contributions and going like pre-tax on your 401k contribution, if you're starting off in your career and you're making, $35,000 in your starting job and your earnings potential is much higher, then when you're actually earning those extra dollars, yes, you need to be more concerned about taxes and what type of vehicle to put it in. But when you're just getting started, it's really about cash flow management. It's about understanding you need to save. Take in your income and don't have the expenses exceed that income. That's the basic. And yes, contribute enough to a retirement plan if you have a traditional employer that's doing a match. Yes, that's an important piece. But outside of that, just get into that habit of living kind of frugally, living within your means.
It's funny, Doc. The HSA is a thing that tax nerds pay a lot of attention to. And we could have...
Is there a baby being lulled to sleep somewhere?
All right, so that's one of the disadvantages of the construction situation, being at someone else's house where you don't control the grandfather clocks.
It's a cool chime. I'm going to do that again because I think everybody be distracted. 3, 2, 1. Doc, I want to turn to you for another thing. We see so many of our tax nerds who really love the idea of the HSA. But what they love about it is not the fact that it's a high deductible plan, so that it's less expensive, that I put this money in an account. It's the fact that I can invest that money. I've come to you specifically as a medical professional because there's a big piece of me that thinks that a lot of our Uber nerds, they're not going to go to the doctor because I need that money to multiply for later, right? I'll just go ahead and walk it off and everything will be fine. Do you think that's really happening?
I don't know if that's happening. I like HSAs. I think they do something that, for instance, tax loss harvesting doesn't. So a lot of, again, us non-CPAs hear tax loss harvesting and think it's the greatest thing in the world and have no idea that it actually changes your basis. And therefore, you one day will pay taxes. Yes, it puts those taxes off. Yes, there's some benefits. I think the same thing with the 1031 exchange. If you die with that property, great. But if you don't die with that property and you eventually sell it, your basis has been changed, which means you're going to pay more taxes eventually. Here's what I like about HSAs. It's the one place where you're actually winning the game, right? So you put it in tax-free, it grows tax-free. And then as long as you use it on medical stuff, you can spend it tax-free. There are very few vehicles that allow you to do that. Yes, I guess that could keep someone from going to the doctor, but you can always pay with your normal cash out of your checking account and let it grow and let it grow. And then once you get Medicare age or start having all those problems and hospitalizations that older people have, you can start using it then. There will be plenty of medical costs in the future, even if you pay out of pocket for some of those now.
Yeah, my problem isn't liking the HSA. I think sometimes money nerds like it so much that we're like, okay, I'm going to make sure I don't use any of this money.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is also getting to that whole idea that I'm surprised we haven't said it yet in this episode, the tax tail wagging the wealth dog, right? So yes, if you're letting taxes make you decide not to go to the doctor, and that could have really bad consequences, then we're thinking way too much about taxes and not enough about life. And maybe that's part of this conversation is, again, it's great to think about tax optimization and it will make your life better, but you can take it too far. And at some point it becomes the thing instead of a helpful tool.
Deb, let's talk about another gotcha, annuities. There have been all these studies done that show that all this money is trapped inside of annuities. inside the United States, around the world, but in the United States specifically, I don't know how they're taxed elsewhere, but in the US specifically, you know, it's last in, first out, meaning that any money the annuity makes has to be taxed before the basis gets taxed, which means a lot of people hang on to their annuity money and they never live because they're afraid of the tax. Are annuities just a big tax gotcha, or do we need to just feel free paying the tax?
Yeah, I mean, I think for annuities, I don't use them a lot in portfolios. I think if I do use them, it's really because they already had an existing annuity and it might be too expensive to get out. Or if someone just is super risk averse and they want some security and having that kind of guarantee on what their earnings is going to be, it could be a piece of their portfolio. But from a tax perspective, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a great, I'm not a huge fan of annuities in general, just with fees and the delayed tax ramifications. But
well, and that's the other piece of annuities, Deb, just because I'm with you, but I don't think what annuity does is necessarily bad, right? I just think that an annuity, people, like, how often do you ever see an annuity turned into a pension, which is probably its best feature? that it can be income
Rarely.
you don't outlive. You just never see it happen.
Right. Rarely. I mean, typically you're drawing on other assets. If you have, you know, a taxable brokerage account, that's what I always look for first when someone's in that retirement withdrawal stage. And there's always an ordering of priority there. And yeah, annuities are not the first place I go.
It's so frustrating. Another one, Sean, that you'll see one smidgen of Uber nerds really talk about, you know, cash value life insurance. And you see some people online talk about all the magic you can do with cash value life insurance.
Yeah, I've even seen online people say, you know, well, Walt Disney built Disneyland with his cash value life insurance, right? I've seen that. I don't know how true or not.
You can build your own fantasy land too using it.
Well, but okay, so if you're in a situation where you're in the 1950s and marginal tax rates are up to 90%, and you happen to be a filmmaker / theme park builder, well, then yes, maybe you should base your tax planning on Walt Disney. But
So
you know,
you're
it's the year 2024.
Sean, I can see this checkbox. Oh, I matched 2 of the 3. I'm building a theme park, and I'm from the 50s in my brain, but I don't make movies. So,
right. So yeah, I think sometimes these things get too cute. They solve for problems that, you know, most people don't have. And, you know, Jack Bogle, right? He spoke about the incredible opportunity Americans have to own businesses, right? And I'm not here to say the stock market doesn't have its perils, doesn't have downsides, particularly for older retirees. But boy, isn't it really cool that we have an opportunity to own diversified sets of businesses with very low costs, right? As an investor, this is the greatest time ever to be alive compared to, you know, the past. So I think a lot of these things are solving for problems that folks don't have. And it's sort of foregoing this great opportunity to be an owner of thousands of businesses, which over time tends to, you know, be very valuable for most investors.
Mm-hmm.
Owning, Deb?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on the cash value of life insurance. I had a client I just recently started working with and has quite a bit in the cash value life insurance realm, just in working with her prior advisor. And what we were looking at were just, she needs that money for retirement. She needs that for long-term care expenses. She has longevity in her family. So we even recently just exchanged her cash value life insurance policy into a long-term care hybrid policy that can give her some long-term care benefits when she does get older in age and needs to draw on that. We know it's a valuable resource she'll use during her lifetime. She doesn't know that she'll have assets to pass on to her kids, and that's not her main priority. It's really to make sure she still has enough comfort to get through the rest of her life. So even just from the non-tax perspective, just understanding why before you get invested in a particular vehicle, it's really important to ask those hard questions and just understand the underlying premise behind them.
But it's, the part of your story that frustrates the heck out of me is that when I was an advisor and I had the 1 out of 100 people that cash value life insurance was a great tax shelter, was a great place for them to be because we'd maxed out everything else and it was beautiful. We could follow the modified endowment contract line.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get them to do it because too many salespeople were selling them to people like your client that
Right.
didn't need it.
Right.
And because word on the street is that these things suck, and they do for most people, but for that one
But
person
for other
with
people, they can be. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a case-by-case basis, but if you don't have someone working in your best interest telling you exactly what's suitable for you, it really can be a dangerous and slippery slope.
It's so frustrating. So I love this conversation, guys. We will link to Mr. Piper's awesome piece that inspired this conversation on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. Let's find out what each of you guys are doing before we say goodbye. We'll have our guest of honor go last. So Doc G, what's happening over at the Earn and Invest podcast, my friend?
When this episode drops, yesterday it will be my episode with Kelsa Dickey. She is a coach of coaches. So she's a money coach, but she also teaches coaches how to coach. And we really explore this idea of when you become the teacher of teachers, right? So what is it in your life that you're good at, that first you get interested in, then eventually you do for a living? And do you ever get to that point where you can actually teach the teachers? And it's a real interesting conversation, as well as we just touch on what you would use a money coach for.
You know, it's funny. I've heard her speak before and she's amazing. And frankly, we need to have her on the show. So before I drop this joke on everybody, I just want to make sure we're clear on that. But they say that if you don't know, those who don't know how to do it, they teach it, right? And then if you don't know how to teach, then do you teach the teacher? Is that the next?
Maybe. I don't know. In medicine, they used to call it, see one, do one, teach one.
Yeah,
that was
right.
always what we did. Is so for a procedure, you see someone do the procedure, you do it yourself, and then you teach one. And so, yeah, hopefully you get good enough at it that you can be a teacher of teachers.
No, and I dropped that joke, and she's amazing, and we should go listen to her on Earn and Invest. Let's go, ladies first. Next, Deb, what's coming up on the Beyond Budgets podcast?
Yeah, we just had an episode not that long ago on just basics of investing, and I'm going to take it a little step further and do another solo episode around values-based investing. So for those who have more of a faith-based orientation and they want to express that through their investment choices, that episode is going to be for you.
Does that get harder over time, or how long have you been practicing, Deb?
Oh gosh, I started doing financial advisory work back in 2006, almost 20 years.
Yeah. So looking at 06 versus today, is it harder to do value-based investing or easier or about the same?
Easier for sure.
It's actually easier now.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more momentum in the values-based investing world. So especially like on the biblically responsible funds, there's just a lot more entrance into the market. And then from a performance perspective, they're actually very close to their kind of non-faith-based peers. So
without all
this,
this,
within a 1 percentage point return difference.
Oh yeah. Without all the
fees.
sin stocks in there that, well, seriously, people talk about, well, those make all the money, right? So you don't have to go against your values.
Yeah. So I've been offering that as like another portfolio option for clients of Worthy Nest, I guess now for 3 years, and it's been really neat.
Awesome. And we'll link to your website at Worthy Nest and to the podcast on our show notes page. Sean, thanks for hanging out with us too again, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
What's happened at the FI Tax Guy?
So this week I'm publishing a post on, it's the fourth quarter, and some folks, especially some early retirees, maybe haven't paid in their income tax estimates for the year. So I've got a post about using an IRA to make up any difference, avoid penalties, that sort of thing, getting those 2024 income taxes paid up.
Dude, you do all the fun topics. And actually, if you need to know, make sure it's at the FI Tax Guy that you go to, and we'll link to Sean's amazing YouTube page. I almost forgot what it was, Sean. YouTube page on our show notes as well at stackingbenjamins.com. All right, Doug, you got it from here, man. Finish this thing out. Lots to learn, but what were our big three today?
Well, Joe, here's what's stacked up on our to-do list for today. First, Remember that educational and hilarious thing that Deb Meyer said about the tax stuff? Deb, I'd say it, but I'll never have your comedic timing. So, why don't you just tell us again? Go ahead.
All right. I will say on the tax side, Roth IRA versus traditional IRA, or Roth 401k versus pre-tax 401k. Just understand the difference. Roth, it's going to grow. You're putting after-tax dollars in, grow, grow, grow. It has an amazing potential to even be a legacy vehicle. Whereas pre-tax, you're eventually going to pay the piper.
Pay the
Oh
piper,
my God,
like
was
Mike
so
Piper.
good. That was so funny. Oh my God, it was even better the second time. Second, I don't know about you, but I know my life was changed forever when Sean Mullaney brought sexy back to taxes. Give it to us one more time, Sean.
If you're listening to the Stacking Benjamins podcast in 2024 or later, you probably shouldn't use Walt Disney as an avatar for your tax planning. That said, if you happen to be listening to the Stacking Benjamins podcast in the 1950s, you might want to consider using Walt Disney as your tax planning example.
See what I'm talking about? Damn, I could listen to him all day. But the big lesson, don't question whether I'll get revenge when you beat me at cards. Joe's mom told me upstairs that for Christmas, I should get her something with diamonds. Oh, I think I'm buying her a deck of cards. Ha! She'll never see it coming. Thanks to Doc G for joining us today. You'll find him and his brilliant work at the Earn and Invest podcast. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Thanks to Deb Meyer for hanging out with us today. You'll find her fabulous Beyond Budgets podcast wherever you listen to finer podcasts. And thanks also to Sean Mullaney for joining us today. You'll find him hanging out on his YouTube channel, Fi Tax Guy. Subscribe right now, or smash that subscribe button. Isn't that what all the YouTube bros say? I'm down with it.
All right, we got to do an after show because I totally forgot to do Aaron's question. Aaron, I sat and told you that we're doing it. Aaron's been waiting this whole time. He's like, when the hell are you getting to mine?
That's
All right.
the way to keep them listening.
That's
the way to keep 'em listening.
bait and switch.
Tune in next time when.
All right, let's do a very quick after show. So it'll be 45 seconds of silence and then 3, 2, 1. You know, it's funny. We performed this live on YouTube and I totally forgot that Aaron in the audience had a question. So here's Aaron's question. By the way, if you want to join us, today we're on a Tuesday. Usually we're on Wednesday afternoons about 3 p.m. Central. So do the math at wherever you are, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Okay, 2 p.m. Mountain. We'll do all of them. But Aaron asks this, guys, if you have a small business, is it better to have an S Corp versus a sole proprietor? I've heard the S Corp allows you to pay yourself as an employee. Does that really help with taxes? Let's go. If you guys don't mind, let's go right to the Fi Tax Guy. What are you thinking, Sean?
All right. So I tend to think S corporations are oversold in the world, right? So the main planning concept is something we talked about earlier in the podcast, payroll taxes, right? So if you're working sole proprietorship, there's a form on your tax return every year, Schedule C. You put here's the revenue from the business, here's the expense from the business. And then you get to a net profit line. Well, that net profit is then subject to self-employment tax. And people don't like that because, hey, it's another tax you got to pay. And so let's say your net profit was $100,000. Well, by my quick and dirty math, a little over $14,000 of self-employment tax. Well, what could we do to reduce that self-employment tax? Well, we could have our business in a legal entity, usually an LLC, but could be another one. And we make an S corporation election. Now what we do is we say, well, we had $100,000 of profit. We'll W-2 payroll ourselves like we're a regular employee. Maybe it's $50,000, maybe it's $60,000, maybe it's $40,000. It has to be some reasonable compensation. That's a whole other podcast episode, so let's not go down that rabbit hole. But the cool thing about that is if our reasonable compensation is only $50,000, now we're only paying payroll tax on the $50,000, not the full $100,000. So it's a way to reduce payroll tax. We say, well, why doesn't everybody just do that, right? Well, you've created a new tax return. You got to do W-2 payroll. There are services that do that for you, but it's still, an administrative task. And you've reduced stuff like a solo 401k contribution or a SEP IRA contribution. I think for a lot of people, the benefits of an S corp may not be worth the squeeze, may not be worth the administrative tasks and the hassles that come with it, but it's absolutely a valid planning option. I do think it tends to be a little overhyped. Deb, I'm curious your thoughts on it.
I'm hoping
Yeah.
Deb fights with you, Sean. Come on, Deb, bring it. Fight with them.
Well, I think it's important to evaluate what stage of the business you're in. So for a lot of startups, they think, oh yeah, S Corp, I'm going to save on taxes. And that's not always the answer. As Sean pointed out, you really do have to have a solid base of not only income, but profit. So after the expenses are paid, you still need to have a decent amount of earnings coming your way. For a lot of people, getting an LLC set up is a great first step because that is a legal entity that, from a liability perspective, it kind of separates you as an individual from the business, which is under that LLC umbrella. And then if you set it up individually, you could be taxed as a sole proprietorship early on. And then maybe as you're building the business, you're starting to have more recurring revenue, you have more of a predictable profit, then you could consult with a CPA. I always recommend consulting with a CPA before doing an S election. I had a client not that long ago that set up her own LLC, did an S election, and by the time we talked about it, her business wasn't going to be profitable. She only had expenses, no income. And I was like, no, you need to rescind that immediately. So again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice. I am a CPA and I do help clients with some of those conversations. But depending on where you're at in that business journey, it's important to think about just going through those financials with your CPA before making that big decision.
Doc, that was one of the most hilarious after shows we ever had.
It was so funny. I couldn't help myself.
Oh my God. We'll stop right there.
Okay.
All right, guys. Sorry, Aaron, that I didn't bring that earlier. Doug?
Don't leave.
Yes. Contributors don't leave, but let's say goodbye to everybody. Thanks to everybody on X and on YouTube. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you later.